So as I was finishing last week's episode and I was thinking about me being an uncle, it got me thinking about my Uncle Rick, and I said, shit, I got to figure out what month he died in 2017 because it's got to be right around this time. And then I realized he passed away in 2016, May 25th, 2016, at the age of 60. My apologies, Uncle Rick. So we need to take a quick detour and go back before we continue on with my story. When I think about my Uncle Rick, at least from my perspective, there wasn't much that brought him joy. I don't know if it was a shtick or if he really was that way, but he wasn't grumpy and he wasn't mean-spirited. In fact, he was kind, generous, thoughtful, but most of the time he was just like, blah, but in a funny way, kinda. Hey, Rick. Hi. What's going on? Nothing. So boring down here. Meaning Cape Cod. When I think of what brought light into his eyes, or when did I see him smile or get a pep in his step, there's two things I think about: gambling and food. And music. He loved music, but that was more just him like sitting on the recliner and jamming. But my Uncle Rick was a compulsive gambler, without a doubt. Gambled for most of his life, and he definitely appreciated and loved food. So those were the big two. He was a pretty good cook himself, and he always put out a good spread at the holidays, and he always got excited for a good meal. But the way I was at the end of my gambling when I would hit a hand pay on a slot machine and I was numb, I honestly feel like that's the way he was for the second half of his life, or at least as long as I knew him, especially when he was gambling. The only time I can remember him showing any type of real positive emotion when gambling would be playing a poker game with the family for $5 or $10. And if he won the hand, he would give his signature, yeah! Another one of his signature moves was to announce a raise when he didn't have cards, or he wasn't even sitting at the table, or he was approaching the table. I raise. Oh, I don't have cards. He was the best. But if we're talking about gambling and being angry or numb, I cannot tell you how many times I watched him scratch a ticket and win $100 or $500, and everyone around him being like, yeah, awesome, all right, cool. And he would just be stone-faced because he wanted more, because it wasn't enough. I don't know. He never really said. Or how about when he was chasing a book at the convenience store? For those of you who don't know, chasing a book means he would literally tell the guy behind the counter, don't sell any other tickets off of that particular book. I'm buying them all. We would be down the Cape visiting, and he would be smoking a cigarette at the front door. He would crack it open even though the smoke would still come into the house, and he'd be telling us, yeah, I got to go down the street. I got some winners to cash. He would run tabs with these guys at these convenience stores, meaning he would buy $200 worth of scratch tickets, and the guy at the fucking Tedeschi's would give him a line of credit. Write down on a piece of paper, okay, Rick, you owe us $700 now. Got it. All right, have a good night. And then he'd bring home the tickets, and he'd keep them in his pocket, either his shirt pocket or his back pocket of his pants. I always found that so funny. 18-year-old me was like, all right, you going to scratch them? Like, let's go. And he would just sit, sometimes for an hour, with the tickets in his back pocket. And then finally he would sit at the table. He would get a good quarter, and then he would meticulously scratch. Always angry. And he was a pro. Depending on how many spots he matched on, he knew exactly what the payout was going to be. If it's a $5 ticket and he had 5 matches, he was pissed. Normal people would be like, let's go, 5 matches, but not Rick. He'd scratch that 4th spot and say, 4 is good, better not be 5. 5 is going to be $10, watch. And then he scratches that 5th spot. Motherfucker! You $2 a piece, $10 on a $5 ticket. Fucking disgusting. He had that woe is me mentality. And he scratched tickets a lot. Probably every day for a lot of years. Years later, around 2013, 2014, he was first diagnosed with cancer. It was a pretty poor diagnosis from what I can remember, but it wasn't terminal quite yet. But he didn't really take care of himself. He smoked a couple packs a day for 40 years, and he never went to the doctor. never got a colonoscopy his whole life. A year or two went by and the cancer spread and it got worse. And then he got real bad news from his doctor that it was incurable and he had maybe a year left to live. I'll never forget when we had a party for him in the summer of 2015. It was in his backyard, and it was bizarre because nobody really said it out loud, but it was essentially one of those "we're really sorry that you're about to die" parties. My cousin Dave was there. Everyone went. Cousins, aunts, uncles, grandparents, second cousins I hadn't seen in a while. I remember at the end we took a big group picture, and my cousin Kev, one of his two sons, was bawling his eyes out in the picture. And why the fuck weren't all of us bawling our eyes out? I mean, I know death is a part of life, but still, it was just weird. Really sad. I know people do these parties and you want to be able to say goodbye, but I kept thinking, he still looks like himself. Are we sure he's going to die? The gambler in me was still holding out hope that somehow, some way he would beat it. But the realist in me knew that it was most likely only a matter of time. He didn't seem like he was really fighting it. A few months later, I got a call from my mom asking if I wanted to see my Uncle Rick. She had been going down to visit him, and she warned me that he was not doing well and he did not look good. And I remember thinking, I was just at his house this past summer, and then I went to see him a couple months after that. How much different could he look? It's only been a couple months. I went with my parents, and we picked him up at his house, and I could not believe my eyes. He was thin, really thin. His skin was gray, and it's like he was moving in slow motion. He was almost unrecognizable. Oh, and by the way, guess where we were going for the night? Where did he want to go out of anywhere he could go? Foxwoods. He couldn't walk long distances, so we pushed him in a wheelchair. My dad, his brother-in-law, and best friend of 45 years, they were the same age. But if you could have seen it, it looked like my dad was pushing around his father. We tried to keep it light, but I couldn't help but think every 5 seconds that this could be the last time I ever see my uncle. At one point, we were playing blackjack, and the dealer called him my grandfather. I can't remember the context, but I remember quickly correcting the dealer and be like, no, that's my uncle. I don't even know if Rick heard him or cared. He definitely didn't care. I remember he couldn't even really stack the chips when he was placing his bets. He was so weak. I've never really thought about that night in the detail that I am right now, and I can't help but think how sad it is that he chose this to be one of the last times he ever left the house. The trip wasn't what we had hoped because he couldn't really enjoy himself. My dad and I were in one room, and he and my mom were in another room, and we ended up leaving early in the morning because he couldn't sleep. He was in so much pain. It ended up being the last time I ever saw him. A couple months later, I got a call saying he had died. And then I got another call saying that I was being asked to read his eulogy at his funeral. I immediately said yes, but I was definitely nervous. I didn't know how I would be able to get through it without breaking down. Even though we all knew it was coming, it was still going to be really hard. I'll never forget sitting on the couch at the backyard in Everett with a yellow legal pad just sobbing, trying to write it. This is not a good sign, I thought. I'm going to be a fucking puddle in the church. I made sure to talk about his childhood, meeting my dad in high school. I made sure to get all their friends' names and mention everyone that used to hang out on Linda Circle in Marlboro. How they would terrorize my grandparents by blaring Zeppelin from the basement at all hours of the night. He owned a horse at one point. Of course, it was a racehorse. I remember the pictures in his room on his wall of him smiling next to the horse after winning a race. I talked about the love he had for his children, Derek and Kevin. He had them later in life. I remember one Christmas when Derek was just a baby and Christmas Eve at my Aunt Diane's house in Clinton, that big house on Water Street. And I remember laughing as Rick walked in at 43 or 44 years old, carrying a baby, looking completely overwhelmed. Maybe not overwhelmed, but out of sorts. But the best part about this time in his life was that he smiled more. He did crack jokes. he opened up a little bit more, and it was all because of his sons. They brought him joy. After we laid him to rest, I obviously continued on my journey of gambling recklessly and compulsively. I think about my Uncle Rick all the time, especially in recovery, and I can't help but think of, if he was alive, would he have made it to a 12-step meeting? He was always so supportive of me. At the very least, I know if I asked, he would have came to a meeting. Not for him, but for me. I will say this, though. There have been certain moments in my recovery in these rooms where I'm at my most vulnerable, or I've had to share something so painful, and somehow, some way, I get through it. I've always chalked that up to God giving me the strength and the guidance. But I don't think it's just him. I think my uncle has been in and will continue to be in those rooms with me. Welcome to the Modern Meeting. All right. Hey, everybody. Episode number 30. Welcome to the Modern Meeting. My name is Adam. I'm a compulsive gambler. My last bet, February 8th, 2022. I got to say, once again, this is a weird episode because I'm by myself. And not only am I by myself, but I'm looking at my phone, which I'm doing it because the camera is so much better than the camera on my laptop. I need a new laptop, but it's still weird. And it's especially weird now that it's on video. You guys have heard these episodes before where I'm, doing this, but at least I'm not having to be looking at myself. So we're gonna cut this really quick because it's weird. I don't know if I should be looking there or there or there. Anyways, Jason Mayo. I mean, the courage that this guy has. Okay, I mean, it's one thing to talk about your story and to talk about addiction, but to open up about your struggles with mental health and being so open and honest, I don't think, even though he's been doing it for 15 years and he's written books and he's got all of this stuff going on, I don't know if anyone in his position would ever realize like how powerful it is what he does. And I hope he knows that, Also, who watches the Karen Reed trial? Deans, I know you do, but I think we need to do a spin-off episode about the Karen Reed trial because I did not know anything about the Karen Reed trial until like 6 days ago. Obviously, like I saw the word Karen Reed like on the internet all the time, but I don't know. For whatever reason, I didn't like dive in, and it's been going on for like, 2 years or whatever, but I'm in. And I got questions. I got opinions. I don't know. I know it has nothing to do with recovery. Well, it kind of does because they were all fucked up that night. But anyways, we might need to do like some bonus episodes. By the way, this is the first Thursday episode, and it's 11:13 a.m. on Thursday, and I still haven't put it out. My apologies. It's coming right now. Anyways, sorry, I'm rambling. But besides that, this is going to be an editing nightmare. We're good. Hopefully, I'll get this out very soon. SoberNotSubtle.com, Jason Mayo. He's the man. He's who you're about to listen to right now. I really need at least someone. I need one person in the room when I do this because this is just weird. Anyways, here's my conversation with Jason. Whew, that was tough. Hey everybody, my guest today is an author, award-winning visual effects artist, and a certified recovery peer advocate. He is also the founder and creator of the website Sober Not Subtle, a place that shares experiences, opinions, and insights on sobriety, mental health, and recovery. Please welcome to the Modern Meeting, Jason Mayo. Jason, welcome, bud.
No fake applause or anything like that. I feel like there
I'll
should
put
be
it in.
fake applause.
I'll put it in post.
Okay. All right. Cool. I'm actually sitting in a studio, a gaming studio that I built uh, during COVID because I started streaming on Twitch.
Yeah, yeah,
So I
yeah.
became like a partnered Twitch streamer. So I have like this stream deck with like 200 sound effects.
That's
So
sick.
you can't get.
Do you play that guitar in the back?
Oh, there's so many. Let me see if I have like. I know nobody else can see this but us, but might as well. I can't. I
The
can't
YouTube
switch it.
people will see it.
No, I can't switch it. Anyway,
Oh yeah.
I'd show you the whole studio, but yeah, there's like 11 guitars in here and
Wow.
a bunch of costumes and
That's
equipment and
awesome.
yeah, but
So yeah, I mean, you're doing my research. I mean, there's so many different things I want to talk to you about besides recovery, but this is a recovery podcast, so we got to start there at least.
yeah, man, anything.
I mean, so my first question, obviously, so was it just alcohol for you, or was it alcohol and drugs?
It was alcohol and drugs.
Okay.
It started with alcohol super early just
Hmm.
because I mean that's what kids did 13,
Right.
14, at least where I grew up on
Yep.
the mean streets of Long Island.
Yep.
Um, so and I always drew the line because I was an athlete in school. So and
What'd you play?
well, I played everything, but in high school I concentrated on wrestling.
Okay.
So I was one of those guys who I like to drink, but I would always like, smoking is for dirtbags.
Right.
Like
Right.
smoking cigarettes, weed, everything. It's all for dirtbags. I would never do that. It's, can I curse on this?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Fuck yeah.
yeah, it's fucking gross, whatever. So, but what happened is like, second half of senior year when wrestling was over, started smoking weed. It's like, and
Hmm.
then I just crossed every single line throughout the years. But at the end, it was mostly opiates and alcohol. I mean, there was a whole. I mean, everything. If you put it in front of me, I did it.
Yeah.
But yeah, opiates was a problem, and we can get into that, I'm sure. But
Yeah.
you
No.
know,
So I know that I know that March of 2010 is your clean date,
mhm.
which is amazing. Do you remember going back? Do you remember when you first realized that you had a problem, and was it with anything in particular, or was it just kind of a moment where you're like, I'm doing everything to excess?
The easiest thing that I've been able to do lately, especially with my family and my friends, is just say it's in the memoir. That's all.
Yeah.
That's all I
Right.
do because I'm like, oh wow, I actually wrote a chapter about that, so I can really talk about it now.
Yeah. Love that.
Um, you know, I was a blackout drinker right away. Probably started. I mean, I started blacking out right when I started drinking, but I started drinking alone around the age of 15. I was always like one of those creative, write poetry, write songs and music and lyrics and stuff. So I'd sit down in my like Greg Brady pad downstairs in my mom's basement that was all decked out with the red light and the kerosene heater and the stereo and all this stuff. And I would just sit around. I'd like listen to The Cure and whatever simple what is it called, The Smiths, and just drink by myself and just it's like that self pity like wallowing in your own misery thing. But so I kind of always knew that I drank differently because I would hide that, right? But people started calling me out. Like my girlfriend in high school, I remember her mom once called me out and said she thinks I'm an alcoholic and I should get help. And I didn't know what that really meant at the time at 16, 17 years old, but I knew that it meant that I couldn't hang out at her house anymore, you know?
Right. Right.
Um, and then throughout the years, my mom would start to say, "Hey, you think you're drinking a little too much?" And then by the time I got to college, it was, I knew I had a problem. I was slowly self-destructing and I was fine with it, you
Right.
know?
So talk about, so once you got to college, is that when you started dabbling in other things besides alcohol?
Well, yeah, definitely. So I had tried cocaine before I went to college. The chapter is called "Cool Cousins and the Cocaine Bus."
Love.
that's that chapter. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I was at. We would have these family outings, right? On my dad's side of the family, and like I guess I was the youngest of the young cousins,
Mm-hmm.
aside from my brother. My little brother was like 4.5 years younger than me. But so I was like, 14, 15, 16 on these outings, and we would all take this coach bus up to like upstate to like the Nevele, one of those like crazy old Jewish abandoned places that they are now,
Mm-hmm.
And we would all go up there, and on the bus, all the young cousins would be in the back with coolers of Budweiser, and the old people would be in the front with like beautiful briefcases filled with flasks and whiskey and scotch and cigars. And by the time we rolled off the bus at like 10 in the morning, we were wasted.
Right.
And I remember it was the summer before I was going into college, and one of my cousins who I was very close with, he was 10 years older than me. Uh, we were playing softball. We had this big family softball game going, and we were up, and he said, "Come with me to the bus for a second." I was like, "All right." We were already drunk and stoned and whatever, and he pulls me on the bus, and he pulls out this little bag of Coke, and he said, "Have you ever tried Coke before?" And again, I'm 17, right? So I was like, "No, I've never tried Coke." He goes, "Well, you're going to school, so I want you to try it before you go to school because I want you to try it with me." And I was like, "Okay." Like, yeah, I didn't, whatever, fine. So, did a few bumps of Coke and got off the bus, and I hear my dad calling my name because I'm up. And I got up to the plate and I fucking crushed it like over the fence. And I'm
Oh,
like
jeez.
running around the bases like, like a mongoose,
Oh
and
my
everybody's like, "What's
God.
going on? Wait, what?" I was like, and that was the first time I tried Coke.
It's
And
like a
then,
gambler hitting a jackpot early on.
oh, dude, it was awesome. And, so I mean, it was in the
Oh.
culture of my family, right? So I knew right from the get go, it was a very enabling environment,
Well,
right?
that's what I was going to ask. Is there anyone else in your family who suffers from addiction or ended up getting help? It sounds like
My
you got.
brother I have 15 years, so he probably has 13 years sober.
Oh wow, good for
Um,
him.
and he was in Al-Anon before that because his wife is a recovering addict.
Mm,
So she's probably got 20 something years sober at this point. Um, there's one of my cousins is in NA. There's a lot of untreated
right,
addiction and alcoholism. I mean, I can't really speak for anybody, but all I know is they drink and did drugs like I did, right? So,
right.
um, but and in college was my first experience with opioids because I was, we played intramural fraternity intramurals. So, we played football and hockey and soccer and all this stuff. And we were playing soccer. It was the first game of the year, and I forgot my cleats back at the house. So I went into my car, I had my football turf shoes instead. So I was like, you know what, screw it. I'm just going to put on my turf shoes, which was not a great idea because it's not the same.
Mm.
And it wasn't like 10 minutes into the game that I went into slide tackle somebody, and my turf shoes caught the dirt in the wrong way, twisted up my knee, and I wound up tearing my ACL and it was really bad. And I went to school in Oneonta, New York, right?
Yeah.
State school, and it's in bumfuck nowhere. And I wound up having to get surgery that week, but like I found my own surgeon. I found the hospital. Like my girlfriend did all the research. Like my mom or dad, none of them came up to like see. My mom says that she wanted to come up, but my girlfriend was like, "I got it," you know.
Okay. Yeah.
And I always say, like, if my daughters, like one's in college now, one's graduated college, but if they broke a nail, I would be up there in like an hour. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
But
Right. Right.
yeah, so I had this surgery, and this doctor prescribed 3 months of hydrocodone for me with refills, and I was 19, I guess,
Hmm.
and that started that started the painkiller. I took it for pain for about a week, and then I never took a painkiller for pain ever again in my entire life, right?
Mm.
And then later, a couple of years later, my senior year, I got into a fight and broke my hand and had hand surgery up in Oneonta, and got another 3 months of hydrocodone. And so it was
It's so amazing how. So what year was that roughly?
oh god, that was 90 maybe, and then 92,
Okay.
something like that, 90, 91.
I just feel like so many people. It all started with some type of injury.
It's a big problem.
You know.
It's a big problem. I'm on a bunch of coalitions locally, like community coalitions. So we work with kids, and it's all about prevention. And one of the things that we try to create all the awareness around is sports and sports injuries, and
Yeah.
making sure that coaches are aware of signs, and
But what's the alternative? Like, what's the alternative for a kid if they need pain medication? Like, what do they do? Just
well, I mean, you could first of all, you could
a lot of
definitely
Advil.
prescribe it. Well, listen, I've had back surgery, I've had two knee surgeries, I've had hand surgery, and I had back surgery and knee surgery in sobriety.
Mm,
And the difference is, I get prescribed a week of painkillers or whatever it is, 4 or 5 days of painkillers. My wife holds the bottle and she distributes it when I need it. But you know what?
right,
After 3 days, I just switch over to a leave or whatever it is.
right,
So, you don't want to be a martyr. You don't want to be a martyr in pain, especially, getting sober. I don't want to fucking be in pain but
right,
you have to be responsible. And if you take something as prescribed, knowing the risks, that it's habit forming or it could be habit forming, then you monitor it and you manage it. But back then it was, I don't think nobody really knew how dangerous it was.
for sure.
Drug companies might have, but I
Right.
don't even think the doctors, half of them knew. They just,
Mm.
this is what we do. So
So how many years would you say you were in like active addiction?
25.
Wow.
Yeah, because if I started drinking, I don't have a calculator, but if I started drinking at like 13 ish,
Hmm.
and I got sober at 39. So 13, 23, 33. Oh, it's 26 years about. So
Yeah,
26 years of active addiction. See, I wasn't bad. I was pretty fast.
that was good. That was good. Um, yeah. So it's funny. We both kind of I got clean at 38. You got clean at 39. Talk about looking back. What were some of the things that during you know the 20s and 30s? What were some things that you lost out on because you were busy doing this shit?
Well, I believe co-occurrence is a real thing, right? So I always say that mental health is the gateway drug to addiction, right?
Hmm.
And, for me, I was a kid, a child of divorce. My parents got divorced when I was about 9 years old, and I kind of shut down completely. And from that point on, never really spoke the truth about anything that I was feeling.
Mm.
Turned into the class clown and, really quick to listen to people and really quick to make a joke, but never, ever, ever, ever from the point where that happened did I ever talk about how I was really feeling.
Right.
Um, maybe because I felt, vulnerable and sort of I didn't want to be disappointed again. I didn't want to be let down. And I just I don't know. I'm back in this, I'm a Gen X kid, like this is, nobody gave a shit. Like it was just like, go
Right.
do what you got to do. But, then when I found drinking and drugs, as with gambling and everything, it's, you use it to fill that hole. You use it to numb, with drugs and alcohol. So the thing is for me with drugs and alcohol is when I started drinking at 13, that's the last time I started, dealing with problems, not drunk. So, they say that when you get sober, you basically have the emotional capacity and the emotional bandwidth to deal with stuff of the age that you were when you started using. So I was a 13-year-old mentally and emotionally, as far as like that toolbox I had to like deal with my shit when I was 39 years old. And
God, I've never heard that. That is so like, that just blew my mind.
yeah, because I never like someone. I'm a 12-step guy, and I once heard somebody really early on say, and it confused me, and I didn't have the courage to ask at that point, but somebody said, I didn't come to AA to learn how to feel good. I came to AA to learn how to feel bad. And I was like, well, why would I want to feel bad? Like, I don't want to learn how to feel bad. I know how to feel. But, what he was saying is he knew how to feel good. That was easy. But whenever he felt bad, he would drink or he'd do drugs. So he needed to
Right.
learn how to feel bad and sit with those feelings. And that's exactly what I needed to do. I needed to learn how to freaking feel bad and not run away or,
Yeah.
whatever it was.
Wow. That's amazing. So would you say during that time, were you able to kind of lead the double life? Like did were you the person who everyone could point and be like, "Oh, he's on something," or were you able to kind of hide it and able to kind of lead a good life?
I was definitely a high functioning alcoholic and drug addict,
Mm,
but on the outside. Okay, so when people say high functioning, I don't know, I I'm not sure if I really agree with that phrase, that description, because I was able to run my own business. I had, two kids, two little girls at the time. I was married. I had the house, I had the cars, I had all this stuff that I was managing. I wrote a dad blog at the time. Like I had all this stuff going on. I mean, on the outside, I seemed successful, but on the inside, I was a shell. Right? I
mm,
hated myself. I wanted to disappear. I couldn't look in the mirror, and I didn't understand why I couldn't get it. And I didn't understand why I couldn't stop drinking or doing drugs. But I got everything done. Right? So the drinking, my wife knew that the drinking was bad and it was getting worse and it was affecting our marriage and affecting the household with the kids. A lot of nights not coming home or waking up in the Penn Station bathroom and 18 missed calls later. Like it was a lot of that stuff. um, but she didn't know about the painkillers and she didn't know about coke. She didn't know about any of this. Like I never hid my drinking.
mm,
Okay, I mean, I'd come home and I'd pour a 36-ounce plastic glass of vodka and like splash of Diet Coke and say I'm having one drink, right? But I didn't
yeah.
I didn't hide it. I didn't hide the beers in the fridge or anything. But I never told her about the other stuff. So I was able to live that secret, which also crushes you.
Mm,
And when I got sober, a lot of people were like, "Really, really, you were an
yeah.
alcoholic?" Because I was social when I was social, but I'd black out and I drink by myself a lot too. I
Mm.
did it because of the mental health conditions. You
Well,
know,
so that's my next question is, and you know, you having been working in the space and done so much amazing work, explain to me, like I'm 5 years old, and the audience like they're 5 years old, how could someone with a wife, two daughters, a successful business, explain how you can still hate yourself or how you can look in the mirror and be and not like it? Because it that's what a lot of people grow up hoping. Just give me the spouse and the two kids and the good job that I like, and I'm good to go. Right? Like explain how that doesn't matter if you have a mental health issue.
right? Well, with mental health and addiction, and I always say this, like I I didn't choose depression and anxiety and addiction and
For sure.
alcoholism. It chose me.
Right.
Okay, because they are medical conditions, both those things. Substance use disorder and depression and anxiety and bipolar and schizophrenia and all that stuff. They're all medical conditions. um there's a lot of stigma out there which makes people think that depression, um anxiety, like depression is laziness, right? Why can't you just get out of bed, right? Anxiety is overreacting. Why can't you just calm down, Or alcoholism is having poor willpower. Why can't you just have one drink, right? But it doesn't work that way, right? So the mental health part, aside from the fact that depression runs in my family, which I didn't really know back then, but my mom has depression. Both my maternal grandparents were diagnosed with depression. My brother has depression, is on medication. Like, it was all around me. I just didn't know about it. But
Mm,
you know, I- it's hard to put it into words, but it really for me stemmed from feeling that I wasn't good enough and I didn't deserve all the things that I had.
mm,
Okay? So no matter how much I had, whether it was material or family, friends, it didn't matter. I never thought that I deserved it. And maybe that really came from being a kid from a broken home. not understanding why everything had to change, and was it my fault, all that stuff. So I think a lot of those attitudes, um, and the way I saw myself were from the situations that I had to deal with when I grew up. But that I was just unlucky that I also had the brain chemistry that would have me develop depression and anxiety, and
Mm.
have the brain chemistry to become an addict once I stopped using, right?
Right.
um, Go ahead. I was just going to say, I know most a lot of people that have mental health, like depression, anxiety, whatever the diagnosis. Not all of them have substance use disorder, but in my life, and in my sober life, and in the work I do now, I haven't met many people that live with substance use disorder that don't also have mental health conditions,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So, and which is why I say it's usually the gateway drug to addiction, right?
Mm.
But yeah, it's hard. It's
Yeah,
hard to
no.
explain.
It's as you're talking, I was thinking of, I can remember any time in my life while I was gambling, if things started going well, I would find ways to fuck it up, like that whole self-sabotaging thing. And I think that's kind of what you're saying, where I, I don't think I ever thought like, oh, I don't deserve this, but almost things going well gave me anxiety. I needed the chaos. I
Right.
needed the constant, that constant worrying of like, how am I going to pay this person, or how, when am I going to get that money? It's just, it's fascinating, to be honest. But so talk to me about, before we get into, what life has been like since you've been sober. Um, what were, what were some of your quote unquote rock bottoms that led you to getting help?
Oh, well, I had a lot of emotional rock bottoms. Like, I was commuting into the city for 30 something years, back and forth when I was in advertising, visual effects, animation, whatever it was, and
Mm,
it was brutal. Like, commuting back and forth into the city an hour each way, and then the time it takes to get to the train and to and from the train, and then the 15-16 hour days in between working. And I was able to count on like one hand how many times I had dinner with my family when I was in that career.
yeah.
And just so that alone takes a toll on you mentally and physically. um, and because of the career that I had, it was um, it was really conducive to a life of um, drinking and doing drugs, and sort of just partying. Really, I mean, we had beer taps at my office. I owned a company with a partner of mine, and we had beer taps at the
Yeah.
office, right? And
Yeah.
so it was
That'll
acceptable.
do it.
That'll do it. So there was one bottom that I think was probably the thing that made me realize I needed to change, even though I had a bunch of bottoms after that.
Yeah.
And it's also the thing I think that really drew the line in the sand for my wife, basically saying, you're pathetic and you need to get your shit together because I'm not dealing with it anymore.
Mm,
And we were going out. We had finished a job with some clients, and we were going out to dinner. And so we were drinking beforehand at the office, and went out to this fancy dinner. It was me and like six clients and my head of sales, and we were having a great time. Fancy restaurant. We just like all these like appetizers. I remember we had bone marrow was one of the appetizers, and I'll
oh
never eat
yeah.
that again. I can't even look at it without wanting to puke. But drinking bottles of wine. I was mostly a vodka guy, so I was drinking my vodka and Diet Cokes. And before we even left that restaurant, I was seeing double.
Yeah.
But nobody else is seeing double.
Right.
Like, I'm seeing double, and it's like the night even close to being over. And then after that, we went to a bar, um, and I must have blacked out in that bar because I didn't wake up with my credit card. Um, I was told that I had punched one of my employees in the arm, just being an asshole, and he actually almost decked me. Um, I said maybe I got roofied or something like that, whatever. I don't
Right.
know.
Right.
And then at one point I woke up like I said before, in the Penn Station bathroom. I just woke up and I was on the floor, by the toilet, which is not a nice place. Like,
No.
I don't know if you've ever been to Penn Station, but it's
Oh,
not.
too many times
Yeah,
waiting for
yeah,
the Greyhound to go to
right. So, and then I woke up the next at home, and it's my job to get my kids ready for school in the morning. At the time, they were like 7 and 3, or 6 and 3, or whatever. So one was in elementary school, one was in preschool, and I was still drunk from the night before.
Mm.
And my wife woke me up and was just like, "You're on your fucking own." Like, she gave me, like, the look that she gave me that day was, I could have seen it as the same look, like, you're an idiot, get your. But for me, it's like my perspective changed that day.
Mm.
Like, everything, I saw everything that was happening. I saw it from a different perspective. Like, this is not good, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I went out of the house with my kids, and my car wasn't there. I had no idea where my car was. So, and it was the middle of the winter. Also, I got sober in March, so this was probably January.
Mm.
And we were, I was trying to get him to school, and a neighbor pulled up and offered us a ride. And I got into the car, and any other day it would have been like, "Dude, I had the fucking craziest night last night." We would have joked about it. I drank with him before, but as
Right.
soon as I got in the car, his little daughter was like, "You smell like alcohol."
Oh
Right. And I was
God.
like, oh, like, it crushed me.
Yeah.
I didn't pack lunches for my kids. I didn't dress them in jackets in the middle of the winter. And that day was the first day that I ever really felt horrible about, not myself, but about what I was doing to my family. Like, I started to realize the emotional security I was stealing from them.
Mm.
Like, you don't have to, you know, be violent in a marriage. You don't have to abandon someone. You don't have to, crash a car. You can do little things to steal emotional security from people.
Totally.
And so yeah, that was like the main bottom. But I had a few bottoms after that. It took me, another few months to, like, really get my shit together.
And so once you did, what was your course of action when it comes to recovery? Was it 12-step meetings right away?
Yeah, yeah. So my wife and I, at the time, we were in marriage counseling,
Okay.
and it wasn't working because I wasn't telling the truth, and
Right.
I was still drinking and doing drugs. And I had asked my wife one time. I said, "Do you mind if I see the therapist on my own?" And she said, "Sure." And for the first time in my life, and this is like, almost 30 something years of therapy, as being a child of divorce and all that, in and out of therapy, it was the first time in my life that I ever told somebody the God is honest truth. I said, like, I can't stop drinking, I can't stop doing drugs, and I want to kill myself. And it just all came out, it just all
Mm.
came out, like snot everywhere. I was just like,
Yeah.
and she said to me, she says, "It sounds like you've been self-medicating for a really long time, and you might also have depression, you know so I want you to do two things. I want you to see a psychiatrist and get a consultation, let him diagnose you. Maybe you need some medication to help you. And I want you to try to go to an AA meeting." And I was like, ugh, oh, okay. But at that point, I was willing to do, even if I didn't want to, I was willing to try anything because nothing had ever worked. And I wound up doing both those things. And I went on meds right away. I went on a drug called Lamictal, which is originally was used for seizures, but it's used to treat mostly like mood swings. It's used
Hmm.
also in people that have bipolar sometimes too. Um, and that immediately, like, started giving me, like, that level playing field. And I also immediately went to AA, and right from my first meeting, I knew that there was hope. And I don't know why. I don't know what made it click, because after all that drinking and drugs, for one day, just be like, I think this is impossible to explain.
Yeah.
You know,
Same. It's exactly how
impossible
I
to
was too.
explain. And I basically I approached recovery with the same self determination that I approached trying to kill myself with
Right.
drugs and alcohol. And I did. I Like I said, I had my own business, I had a family, I had all this stuff. I had no problem making decisions. But when it came to doing stuff like this for myself, I needed to be told exactly what to do, to
Right.
the letter. Um, and I sought people out who would help me, and told me, listen, think maybe you shouldn't do that because that sounds horrible,
Right.
and and 12 steps really really worked for me, and just the
How quickly did you start the 12 steps into recovery?
I probably started doing them about 6 months in. Well, I actually started doing them right away. I had my first sponsor, um, and the reason why I chose him because I didn't read any of the pamphlets or anything that you should read, and you should read pamphlets if you're going to
Mm,
a 12-step program because it explains a lot. And so I chose a sponsor that had a mohawk that looked super cool, and I just dug the way he sounded. So
mm,
he wound up being a really spiritual guy, and I actually just texted with him the other day just thanking him, because I just celebrated my anniversary, and I was just like, I'm just thinking about you, man. And but I needed a guy. I didn't know it then, but I needed a guy who was married, who had kids, maybe even daughters,
mm-hmm.
and that had was had a professional career, and was slogging through the same stuff that I was trying to get through, that they'd been
Right.
through it. So when I found that person, that's when I started doing this. So I went through a couple sponsors in the first 6 months before I, got into it with this one guy who had a daughter, and he was married, and he was worked in the city like me, and you
And
know,
he's still your sponsor to this day?
no, no, he was my sponsor for a few years. Then I had another guy who was my sponsor probably for about 5 or 6 years, and then when I stopped going to the city, I switched sponsors here, and actually recently, within the last 6 7 months, I took a new sponsor as well. Like
And
I
so you
still
still go to meetings?
Yeah, I still go to meetings. I have a service position. I have a couple sponsees, and I don't go to meetings like I used to. If I hit
Mm,
2 or 3 meetings a week, I'm really really happy with that.
right.
Um, but yeah, I just it's the connection for me,
For
right?
sure.
Like I need to know that I'm around people that understand recovery and want to talk to me about recovery, and that I can talk to about recovery, because those are the people that make me feel not so unique, right? It's that bond, and I think that's what really did it, is to finally be in a room full of people that you know not clinical, just a room full of peers that were like, dude, I've been there, we
Right.
got you. it's
No,
it,
I mean it's anyone who has been in these rooms, we know how powerful it is. But why do you think it's so hard for people to get into these meetings?
I mean, there's a lot of stigma. Again, I talk about
Still.
stigma all the time, and that's one
Yeah.
of the reasons why I started Sober Not Subtle. But the stigma, to me, there's stigma in the rooms and there's stigma outside of the rooms. Okay. So, the stigma outside of the rooms is still, why are you weak? Why do you need that help? Why can't you just do it, on your own? What's wrong? How am I not helping you? And that type of thing. And people still think of, addicts as, the junkie with the needle hanging out of his arm under the park bench. Like that's not what addicts are all like anymore.
Right.
That's not but that's still the stigma. They still think that, a lot of people think that somebody that has mental health conditions is some dude talking to himself on the street, some homeless guy like that sleeps under a bridge. That's not, I mean, that might be the case for some people, but that's not, you know, the person who has mental health or substance use disorder could be the mom in the carpool. It could be, the guy in the cubicle next to you. It could be the dude laughing a little too hard at the party. Like it could be anybody. Um, but I think that the shame um, really keeps people away, and that's why we lose people. Um,
Right. And so I think I talk about this almost every week on the modern meeting, and I go back and forth. It's why I started the podcast. It's that once people enter these rooms, you realize how powerful the 12 steps are, how powerful the fellowship is. Yet we can't promote it. We can't advertise it. Like that's what it says in the big book. That's what it says in the yellow book of GA. In your opinion, like at any point, should we be possibly like rethinking that? And if someone who was sitting at home could like go on the TV and like look in on an actual meeting and listen to and hear the 12 steps, and don't you think that might be like, oh shit, like that, that resonates with me. Maybe I will go to that meeting. You know what I mean? Or
I uh, uh, I mean, for me personally, um, like I don't really talk about AA specifically a lot, especially when I write, you know,
mm,
especially on Sober Not Subtle. I talk about recovery as recovery. And if I do talk about a program, I'll say a 12-step program, right? Like, because it's not like I'm not gonna lie about it. Like, oh, I've done it on my own and I read some books.
right,
Like I belong to a 12-step program. And I think
right.
that's fine. Um, I do believe that it does need to stay anonymous to a certain degree, right? I mean, listen, if we want to have a conversation about it, I really don't think that's a big deal. I'm talking about my experience, right? I'm
Right.
not promoting AA. I'm not saying this is how a meeting is run. This is why you should do it. I'm saying I stepped into a 12-step meeting and this is what worked for me, right?
Yeah, I
But
guess I'm not. Yeah, I'm not. Not to cut you off, but I'm not even. I'm not even saying like I want people to hear everyone else's stories. Like I want people to read that literature. Like I feel like being in a 12-step meeting, I have something that like a lot of other people don't have that would benefit from it.
right.
You know what I mean?
Well, I will say one thing. When Before I got into the stuff that I'm doing now professionally, I I really didn't dox myself a hell of a lot. Like I never really went out and said, I'm sober. Like if somebody asked me why I'm not drinking, my original answer might be, I'm not drinking tonight, you know? But if they
Mm,
asked me two or three times, I'd say I don't drink anymore, you know?
mm,
And most of the time the conversation ends there, right?
right.
Because most people don't give a shit. But
Right.
if somebody really wants to know, I would tell them. But I wasn't one of those guys that put like, the chip on Facebook on their anniversary. I just never did it. I never
Right.
ever talked about it publicly. When I started working in this profession, my whole life became recovering out loud, not AA. Okay, because and
Right.
that's where the stigma in the rooms comes, right?
Right.
Because there are people, whatever program you're in, okay, there are people that think that that's the only program that can work. Becoming a certified recovery peer advocate, what I have learned is that there's multiple pathways of recovery. There's multiple healing modalities that you can choose, and not everything is right for everybody. Okay, so if somebody says, "Well, A doesn't work for me," I'd say, "Well, it's not that it doesn't work. Maybe it's just not right for you,
Right.
right? And let's find something that's right for you." Right, because there's AA, there's smart recovery, there's recovery dharma. You can be into meditation, you can be into hiking, you can do yoga, you can, I run a dad recovery group, a non-denominational dad recovery group once a week, where people come, people that have gambling addictions, disordered eating, people that tried to kill themselves, like all different types of people with mental health conditions and substance use disorder come to this meeting, and it's amazing because it's just, you don't have to say you're an alcoholic, you don't have to do any of that. We just sit there and we talk,
Right.
but there's stigma in the rooms, and I think more than people wanting people to know about a specific program like AA, let's say, I would be I would be happier if more people learned about how many different pathways there are to recover. So nobody thinks that like this is the only way, because if somebody if a certain program or certain, pathway to recovery is not working for somebody, and somebody says, "Well, if you don't get this, you're going to die," then that person might die, right? So,
Right.
what I do is, I try to talk with people and meet people where they're at and say, "Hey, listen, where are you at? What's worked for you? What hasn't worked? How can we explore, ways to get you to the place in your recovery that you want to get to?" And, and then I can use my resources and talk to people about, what's out there and try to hook them up with different resources. But for me, I wish more people knew that other things existed.
Yeah.
Okay.
No,
I'm
that's
an
a
AA guy. That's my thing.
yeah.
But, I know about so many other things now, and I've tried them, and there's so many great things that can keep you sober. And you could do all of them. You could do
Right.
all of them. You don't have to do just one thing. So
Well,
that's what I wish.
yeah. Speaking of doing all of them, I mean, your list of credits is it's lengthy, and Talk about one, when during your recovery did you say like, okay, it's time, like you said, recover out loud, and like when did all of this stuff start happening, the blogs and the website, and talk about that.
Well, I always like to write,
Hmm.
and 2008, when I was still in my active addiction, I started a dad blog. Back then there was like this huge mommy blogger craze, and everybody was doing mommy blogs, and they were talking about drinking wine, and their kids are a pain in the ass. Like that was like the vibe, right?
Yeah,
And there weren't a hell of a lot of dad bloggers at the time, and so I wound up being like, I don't want to fucking write a dad blog. Like, why can't I write a dad blog if they're writing these mommy blogs? And the dad blogs that were out there, they were good, but like none of them had the voice that I had, and none of them, like, I feel like they were kind of like just tiptoeing around things. And
sure.
so I started a dad blog, and it was awesome. Like I had such a good time, and I made so many friends in that community. I wound up being like one of the top dad blogging. It was ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
But it was awesome. But the problem was I wasn't sober for most of the time, and I was talking about the person that I wanted people to think that I was,
Mm,
and I felt shitty about it deep down. Um, but so I started that dad blog, and that was great. And when I got sober, I was like, I don't want to hear myself talk anymore. Like, I don't want to be that I need to figure out who I am and not pretend to be this great fucking dad, husband, all this shit. I need to get my shit together and just shut up for a while.
right.
And, then COVID hit. I was, 13 years sober, 12, 13 years sober, whatever it was. No, holy shit. When was COVID?
2020. So you were like 10 years
Oh
sober.
my god, I was like 10 years sober. So COVID hit, and the place that it was me and two partners, and we had a place in the city, and we decided to close it up and work from home because we knew weren't going back to the space. And slowly but surely I just started to like detach. I was like, you know what? I really like being home with my family, and taking my kid for coffee and like eating dinner with everybody. I started playing video games again. I wound up, joining Twitch because I'm an addict and I have to do things and do it really quickly. So I started streaming on Twitch. I started like 5 times a week. I was making money doing it and having fun and building a community. And it just got to the point where I was like to my wife, I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I don't want to work. I don't want to
Yeah.
do that. Like I had a lot of fear about, money, and, the ego was getting in the way. And, that old saying is like, it always boils down to two things: fear of losing what you have and fear of not getting what you want.
Mm,
And I had both of those things,
mm,
right? Like, I'm never going to make the money I can make if I don't do this. I'm going to lose my reputation, and my kids are going to think I'm a loser, and I'm never going to get another job because I got no transferable skills. And I was caught in this fear until finally my wife was like, just shut up and just quit. Like, just do something, like figure out what you want to do and we'll be fine, like we'll figure it out.
yeah.
And I just started like looking around, and I realized that my passion is I like helping people. And I like talking about recovery to people that are in recovery. And I was introduced to some people, and this, place that I work at now is this recovery center on Long Island. And it's uh it's just this amazing peer led, peer run center. I found out about the certified recovery peer advocate training, which is basically just a person in recovery, learning how to talk to people one on one, and learning how to provide resources for people. And I started doing that while I was still working in my other job. And I finally just told my partners, I'm like, guys, like in 2 or 3 months, like we can either sell it, close it, or you could buy me out because I'm done. And
Yeah.
it felt so good. Like, it not even I didn't know what I was gonna do, but it felt so good to be true to myself finally. Like, that was the missing piece for me. I didn't get sober to be fucking miserable, and I was still miserable.
Right.
And and I found this career, and that's now everything I do is about recovery. Like, it's 24, like I have my recovery, and I have recovery at work, but everybody I work with is sober. All the participants that I work with is sober. I go into the jails, I do the dad meeting, I go into outpatients and talk to all these people. And so I'm always talking and living recovery. And it's just evolved my own recovery so much. And there's a big difference between promoting like AA and things like that and just recovering out loud,
Right.
to not be ashamed of being in recovery. I don't have to say sober, you know. I'm in recovery. I'm a person in long-term recovery. That's who I am. And I want to help normalize the conversation, because if nobody's talking about it, then that stigma is just going to sit there like a fucking fart in a room that doesn't leave, right?
Right.
So it's
Right.
like, I've learned to, you know, talk about it in a way that sort of feels comfortable for me. And, and mental health too. I mean, does it feel scary sometimes talking about it? Yeah, it feels scary.
Mm,
But I don't know. I feel like people have to do it. And I've met a lot of really good people that are willing to recover out loud. And I think it's important, if you
definitely.
can do it. If you don't have to do it, it's
Right.
not for everybody.
Over these last 15 years, would you say that your mental health has improved, or have you just learned how to like manage it better?
That's a really good question. Because when you talk about, if you're a 12-step guy, you've talked about character defects, right?
Right. Right.
And, I've heard people say, like, our character defects never really go away. You could pray on them all you want, but they're not going anywhere. You just learn how to like live with them one day at a time and manage them.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's the same thing with my mental health. Like, I have tools now, right? I'm not afraid to talk and say something. I have a therapist. I have friends that I confide in. I'm not afraid to tell my wife I feel like shit today. You know, I'm not afraid to take a day off of work because I don't feel like performing, one
Right.
day when I don't feel good. Um, there are a lot of things that I can do. I have people that'll call me on my bullshit, and I take medication. I take a couple types of medication, um, that really help me with my depression and my anxiety.
Yeah.
And I listen. Sometimes, I'll fall off the deep end. Like a couple of years ago, I almost had a fucking nervous breakdown. I had a lot of stuff going on at home, and I had just started this new profession. I had a lot of counter transference was happening, whereas I was like taking on a lot of the emotion from the people that I was talking with, and I
Mm-hmm.
was picking a lot of scabs, and I didn't see it, but it snuck up on me, and I almost checked myself into a psych ward.
Yeah.
At 13 years sober.
Yeah.
But again, I sat and I said, "This is going to pass," and all I kept saying to myself is, "This has never happened to me like this before, but when I get through it, I'm going to be able to talk about it with somebody." And tell
Yes.
them I've been through this. I see where you're at. Like, let me help you. And
And you didn't want to use in that moment,
no, that was the last thing I would have wanted to
and you
do.
never really have wanted to in these 15 years.
Like, sometimes it's like a beer looks good, but
Right.
no, I really haven't. I
Yeah.
haven't. And for me, it's not like, I always say, if I ever decide that I don't want to be in recovery anymore, and I want to take a chance and roll the dice, what that is, right? So yeah, exactly. You want to take a chance and roll the dice. It wouldn't start by cracking open, like a Foster's or like a Sapporo,
Right.
and it wouldn't be a martini like with two olives. It would be walking into CVS,
Mm.
buying a pack of Benadryl and a couple bottles of NyQuil, and crushing up the Benadryl and snorting it, and drinking a shot of NyQuil at night because I have a cold, and lying about it for like a few months. My wife, "What,
Yeah.
you're taking Benadryl?" "Yeah, it's my allergy."
Right.
That's how it would happen for me.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't let myself get to that place of desperation. It's a horrible place to be, you
Mm.
know?
Talk about obviously one thing that no matter the substance, us addicts, while we're in active addiction, we lie, and we lie some more. What has it been like in recovery to not have to lie?
Oh, that's awesome. That's such a great thing to point out. Can I just crack open this thing that's not a beer? I don't want to trigger anybody, but it's just a Pellegrino pomegranate and orange.
Oh God, that looks good.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
okay. I mean, I just wrote an article up on my obsession with ginger beer
Oh, I love
because
ginger beer.
oh, it's so good. Like it's probably my addiction is just having different types of ginger beer. I love it.
Mm.
But yeah, the lying thing, man. It's my lying was a lot of lying by omission,
Mm.
right? Like I wasn't like I I didn't cheat on my wife. I didn't do like all the big
Yeah, you
stuff
just
that you
left
would
out
think.
details.
I left out the details, right?
Yeah, right.
And wow, it's such a weight, right? Like to be able to like put your shoulders down, and just be
Mm.
like, "Oh, okay, I can feel good about myself." And listen, don't get me wrong. I still get the shit beat out of me at home a lot. I have two daughters that call me on my bullshit all the time. I have a wife who's very loving and supportive, but she doesn't take my shit,
Now, how
right?
long have you and your wife been married at this point?
We met in college, so we met in 92
Wow, that's
and we've been
amazing.
married since 97.
So
So,
33, so
yeah, approaching 30 years of marriage, 28
yeah.
years, something like that.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
amazing.
And it's amazing she stayed with me too because, it's in the memoir.
Yeah.
But yeah, the lying just I don't know, man. It just I feel better that I can screw up by doing stupid things and
Mm.
not horrible things.
Yeah, and then, when we lie so much, then we forget about what we lied about, then we get a lie about the lie. Like, yeah, I mean,
That's such a good question. Like
mm,
just the lie. That's you know it, most people don't think about that. Like that's like a
yeah.
huge thing with addicts and alcoholics or whatever. It's just trying to pretend to be this person that you're not and
Mm,
hiding all these things that you're ashamed of and because people don't understand. And you're right. It's
yeah.
to not have to
So
do that is amazing.
you mentioned when you have that dad meeting, there are some compulsive gamblers in there. In your experience working with these folks, what are like the similarities and differences you see in compulsive gamblers compared to like drugs or alcohol?
Well, it's cool though too. The company that I work with, the parent company, just opened up a gambling problem gambling and wellness center. So they actually do have an outpatient for people with gambling problems.
Mm,
Um, so I've taken some training and stuff, so I know a little bit more about it. I haven't run into too many people with problem gambling. But what I can tell you is the people that I have talked with, and I've talked with a bunch of people with disordered eating as
mm,
well. And it's similar in the way that it's not the same substance, right? But the feelings are always the same.
yes.
Their feelings are always the same. It's a lot of it is the immediate gratification of it too, right? So, and it's a dopamine thing, right? Like, and the more you do something, the more dopamine you need, and the more you
Mm-hmm.
have to do it. So, whether it's going to a casino, and I've read your story, it's unbelievable, right? I mean, if whether it's going to a casino or binging, for a week straight after you haven't eaten for basically a month, it's like it's the same thing. You're trying to fill this void and you're trying to obtain a feeling that you constantly are chasing that you never ever obtain. And so the feelings are, and the identification with those feelings, like when you hear people sharing in this dad meeting, somebody, who has a heroin addiction could be sharing. And then, the dude with disordered eating could be like, oh, I've never done heroin, but I totally understand what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
That's what's beautiful about it, right? Because it's
Yeah.
really just, I always say, like, everybody's in recovery for something. Okay, let's not be proud, you know. And it
Right.
doesn't have to be like porn or gambling, or it could be just something mental. It could be, trauma in your childhood. Like everybody's in recovery for something. Nobody's
Right.
perfect.
Absolutely. So you mentioned the memoir. I got to ask about this. So, you've had the websites, the blogs, you've had all these things. At what point did you say, you know what? I want to get all this on paper. Like, I want to get this story on paper.
Well, I think that time freed up for me writing wise in a way
Hmm.
because when I started Sober Not Subtle, it originally started as a blog called "If It Hurts, It Helps," which is basically comes from I always say that the most fucked up shit that you go through, it always winds up becoming your greatest assets in recovery.
Totally.
right? So I was like, let me write a blog about recovery when I started working in this new thing, and I said, if it hurts, it helps. Like, so I wrote this. I was writing this blog, and I'm like, I love writing it, but it's so heavy handed. Like, it feels like who's identifying with if it hurts, it helps if they're not like at rock bottom. You know what I mean?
Right,
So
right.
I was like, I want to do something that's not about me. And
Yeah.
I started just thinking about different names and this, and I came up with the sober, not subtle thing. And it just turned into a platform that amplifies people's voices in recovery, or advocates of people in recovery, or sober allies, whatever you want, professionals. And we have like 30 something posts in the queue right now of guest posts, and I've probably write one out of every 10 articles now. And it's just, there's resources, but the more that people do the guest posts, the less I feel the pressure that I have to write. I just
Right.
curate, which is amazing.
Yeah.
And I started like, I just wanted to like exercise that muscle. And the what really happened is I was going through some stuff on my Google Drive,
Mm.
one of my Google Drives, and I found something that I wrote when I was doing step one with that first sponsor in the first month I got sober. And his step one exercise was, I want you to write out your drinking history. And I said, okay. And I like to write. So most people would just bullet point or jot some stuff down in their
Yeah.
journal. I wrote like 15, 16 pages,
Yeah.
like type pages. And from the night my parents got divorced until the day I walked into the 12-step meeting.
Mm.
And I found it and I read it, and I was like the words, like they crushed me, because I was like, wow, I haven't read exactly how I was feeling at that time in almost 15
It's
years.
like a time capsule. Yeah.
Yeah, a time capsule of my darkest self is what it
Yeah.
was.
Wow.
And I said, oh my God, I go, there's an outline of like my life here, because it went from as a kid, to elementary school to college, the painkillers, meeting my wife, getting married, having the kids, doing the dad blog, getting sober with work. So I was like, let me just start, let me just take these little things and just start to break them up into chapters. Let me try it chronologically. And then I just started to go nut. Like, I was just like, I couldn't stop writing. And there's a huge difference. I mean, it's cathartic, it's therapeutic, all you want to say about like journaling, writing, but there's a huge difference between talking to someone about trauma and talking to someone about recovery and all these things, like a therapist, or speaking at a meeting or whatever it is, and writing about it. And
With just you there.
writing about it and forcing yourself to recount the details.
Yes.
And I cried every single time I opened the laptop. Every time I would wind up crying. Sometimes like I had to put it down because I was like, I can't. I felt off for 6 months. I tell my
Yeah.
wife, I said, I don't feel good today. I don't feel right, because I was feeling all these feelings and it was really hard. But I was able to write about it, and it went from like, I want to get to like 20,000 words to maybe I can hit 30, and then maybe I can hit 40, and then maybe I can hit 50, and holy shit, where am I right now? It's 60,000 words. and and I'm really happy with it, like really happy with it. And it's tough to read. I've got about 15 people reading it right now from all walks of life, like people that have written books, editors, social workers, friends, family, and that's scary in itself. But
Yeah.
if I feel good about it, like it was, and again, I just want I if I can put it out there for one person
Hmm.
to say, "Holy shit, dude!" Like, I know exactly how that felt, and I need to talk to somebody. Just save them some time, even.
Yeah.
Um,
Is there a name for it yet?
Yes, it's called. I had this mocked up because I'm an idiot, and I should have done this. Like, I did this like a month ago when it wasn't even finished, just because I couldn't help myself. But it's called "In Case of Emergency, Break Childhood," and
Oh my God.
it's a Gen Xer survival guide to anxiety, addiction, and accidental enlightenment, I think is what it's called.
Wow.
But yeah, so it's
That's awesome.
yeah, it's cool. So between that and the website
Yeah.
and
You're doing I mean you're doing God's work. It's just amazing.
Thanks, man. You are
That's
too.
awesome.
I've
I
listened
mean,
to a
I'm
bunch of these
trying.
podcasts, man. It's freaking great. I was
I
looking forward to
appreciate it.
this. I really
I
was.
appreciate it. No, I mean, yeah, this has been awesome. You're definitely over the last, I'd say the last month, I've been just trying to put myself out there and reach out to everybody, and because I wanted to get some episodes under my belt, and but you're just you're one of these people that you let me post on the website, and I just can't thank you enough, and hope to continue to collaborate and work with you.
Well, I accept as many articles as you would like to write, especially from that perspective too, right? Like,
Oh,
you know, there like mental health. I love when people write about mental health. Um, I had this guy John, who's a vet. He submitted a couple articles about recovery from a vet's perspective, which is such an underserved population. So to get somebody's perspective on that, and I think you might have been the only person that wrote about recovery from gambling so
yeah,
far.
yeah,
So I had somebody write a couple articles about disordered eating. So the more people that can write, this is a call to action. If anybody's out there and is listening and would like to write about their experience about being in recovery or being a sober ally or somebody that deals with mental health concerns or is affected by it because of a family member or a friend, you are more than welcome to write a piece for Sober Not Subtle. And
absolutely,
we'd love to feature it on the site.
yeah. So yeah, like you said, the website is sobernotsubtle.com.
Yep.
And I'm sure, so the book, we can't buy the book yet, right?
Not yet.
Yeah,
I'm having people read it. I have a call on Monday with somebody that I'm hoping can. Yeah, I'm going to self-publish it.
yeah.
I wound up getting the DBA for Sober Not Subtle, and I just submitted the trademark so I can actually publish it under Sober Not Subtle.
Oh, awesome.
Just because I don't, to wait 2 years to publish a book and get rejected by 50 million different indie publishers is just
Yeah,
not. I'm too impatient for that.
right, right.
But yeah, I'll certainly let you know, man. I'll
For
certainly
sure.
let you know.
Well, Jason, thank you again. Much appreciated. I hope to have you back on again soon.
All right, thanks, buddy.
All
I
right.
really
Cheers, bud.
appreciate it. Good
All
times.
right. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. I want to thank Jason Mayo. Remember to check him out at sobernotsubtle.com. Hope you guys enjoyed our conversation. I admire Jason so much. Like he said, we got to keep fighting to break that stigma inside and outside of these rooms. Sharing your story, I mean, it's a good thing. Oops, I just looked at the camera and then I looked that way. That's okay. If you're struggling, tell someone, anyone. You're not alone, right? Speaking of not alone, I better not be alone on June 8th. We're walking 12 miles for the 12 steps of recovery. Email me at modernmeetingpod@gmail.com or DM on Instagram at modernmeeting. Or if you know me, shoot me a text, call me. Hopefully we'll have a good crew for the 12 miles. It'll be a lot different than February. Weather looks good. It is not rain or shine. We're not walking if it's raining. We'll do it on Monday the 9th. That is the rain date. So, as you know, nothing you're ever going to hear in the Modern Meeting, with the exception of our personal stories, is from us. Everything we talk about, we've either heard in these rooms or we've read in the literature. With that being said, that first night in Austin, February 8th, 2022, when I went to my first GA meeting, after the introductions, after the shaking of the hands, after we read the yellow book, and after we answered the 20 questions, and I answered yes to 18 out of the 20, the secretary of the meeting looked at me and asked me if I wanted to share. I wanted to share from the minute I set foot in the door. I was so moved. I was so grateful. I was so shocked at how much I connected with everyone in the room. I wanted to tell everyone my life story and explain how everything in these books is literally my life. All of their stories that I've heard so far, that happened to me. But at this point, I couldn't see through the tears. Everything was so overwhelming. But when I did finally catch my breath to speak, the first 3 words out of my mouth were, "My Uncle Rick." I called him my North Star of gambling. Now, obviously, as a compulsive gambler inside a 12-step meeting, calling someone your North Star of gambling isn't exactly a glowing recommendation for that person. But it is what it is. And he will always be where my story started. And I accept that. Or I'm learning to accept that, and I'm learning to accept everything that happened after that. Because without all of that chaos of gambling for 20 years, I wouldn't be where I am today. It all brought me to this point. It brought me into these rooms. It brought me to this podcast where I've met some of the most amazing people I've ever met. And I'm able to experience the beauty and the power of being in these rooms and being a part of a fellowship where I learned how to surrender to this disease. I was given the roadmap on how to put my life back together. Actually, how to take my life back. We'll see you on the other side.